Eliasray was 71 the night it happened. He had just finished dinner, a plate of fish he'd grilled the way he always had, with lemon and herbs, the smell filling the kitchen like it had for decades. But as he pushed his chair back and stood, a sudden wave of dizziness caught him off guard. His hand trembled as he reached for the table to steady himself, and for a brief moment his mind went blank. He couldn't remember if he had taken his evening pills or even where he'd set them down. His wife, Anna, saw it too, the confusion in his eyes, the way his voice stumbled. It wasn't the first time lately, but this moment felt heavier, sharper, like a warning whispered into the room. When he finally sat back down, Eliasray brushed it off with a weak smile. "Just getting old," he muttered, though inside he was unsettled. "I can tell you, as someone who has cared for many men his age, it is rarely just age. The body speaks in small tremors, forgotten words, moments of unsteadiness. Each one is a signal, and too often families ignore them until the day those signals roar into something far harder to face." That night, Anna reached across the table, her hand covering his, and softly said, "Maybe we should ask the doctor." That simple sentence marked the beginning of a journey neither of them expected. At the clinic the following week, the doctor didn't scold or alarm him. Instead, he leaned forward and asked a question so simple that it startled Eliasray. "What do you usually eat?" Eliasray laughed, thinking it a small talk question. But the doctor pressed, asking about the fish, the weekly traditions, the grill on Sundays. And then the words came, gentle but firm, that certain fish, the very ones Eliasray thought were protecting his heart, were quietly loading his body with toxins that his older organs could no longer clear away. Heavy metals, hidden chemicals, even bacteria that, for a man his age, could mean the difference between a long, healthy life and a decline he couldn't see coming. Eliasray sat in silence. The thought of food, something that had always been tied to love and memory, his father fishing by the river, his own grandchildren running to the dinner table, suddenly felt like a betrayal. But Anna, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand again. "It's not too late," she whispered. And she was right. At 71, the story of his health wasn't finished. There was still time to shift, to swap old habits for wiser ones, to choose foods that didn't just fill his plate, but safeguarded his future. That was the turning point. Not a crash or a dramatic diagnosis, but a quiet realization, born from one night of trembling hands and one doctor's warning. From then on, Eliasray began to look at his meals differently, not with fear, but with care. Every choice mattered. Every swap was an act of protection. Every bite could either cloud his mind or keep it sharp. And what I want to share with you now is not just Eliasray's story, but a reflection of so many men and women his age. Because behind every symptom, every forgotten word, every stumble in the kitchen, there is often something deeper, something we can change before it's too late. So let us begin with Eliasray, his plate of fish, and the quiet shift that set him on a path toward a stronger tomorrow. The following Sunday, Eliasray stood at his grill, the same way he had for years. Smoke curled in the evening air, carrying the scent of marinated mackerel, thick fillets he had sworn by as good for the heart. His grandchildren played tag in the yard, their laughter weaving into the sounds of sizzling fish. To anyone watching, it was a picture of family, tradition, and health. But inside, Eliasray's mind lingered on the doctor's words from just days ago. Not all fish are safe. Some will wear you down without you noticing. He flipped the fillets with his usual practiced ease, but his hands trembled just enough for Anna to notice. She walked over, touched his arm, and asked gently, "Are you sure this is the right choice tonight?" He wanted to laugh it off, but he couldn't. For the first time in his life, the food that symbolized strength and routine now looked suspicious, even dangerous. King mackerel, the very fish his doctor had warned him about, sat on the grill, gleaming with lemon juice and herbs. Suddenly, what once was comfort now felt like a quiet betrayal. As the family gathered around the table, Eliasray found himself staring at his plate more than eating from it. He remembered the doctor's explanation, how mercury builds up in large fish, how older bodies can't flush toxins as they once did. It wasn't just about a meal anymore. It was about memory, balance, even the shaky hands that embarrassed him more than he let on. Anna noticed he ate slower, pushing the fish around instead of enjoying it. Later that night, when the children had gone home and the house fell quiet, she asked softly, "Maybe we should try something different next week." That suggestion lingered in his chest, heavy but hopeful. Different. He thought about what the doctor had said. Swap the risky fish for something safer. Wild-caught salmon, sardines, fish that brought omega-3s without the poison. The idea unsettled him at first. Change always does. But then he thought of his grandchildren running barefoot through the grass, of their laughter ringing in his ears. He wanted to be there for more Sundays, more laughter, more games of tag. And if change meant trading one fish for another, wasn't that worth it? The following morning, Eliasray made his way to the market alone. He walked past the familiar case of mackerel and paused at the rows of wild salmon. The bright pink flesh glistened under the lights, unfamiliar but inviting. For a moment, he felt like a stranger in his own routine. But then he heard Anna's voice in his head. Maybe we should try something different. He picked up 2 fillets of wild salmon and carried them to the counter, his heart strangely light, as if the simple act of choosing better was already protecting him. That week, when Anna grilled the salmon, the children didn't notice the change. They laughed, ate, and asked for seconds. But Eliasray noticed. He noticed that after dinner, he didn't feel the same heaviness in his body. He noticed his hands didn't tremble quite as much when he lifted his coffee cup the next morning. It was a small shift, barely visible to anyone else, but to him it felt like a turning point, a first step away from danger and toward a different kind of strength. That Sunday meal taught him something that no doctor's words could fully capture. It wasn't just about avoiding fish that could harm him. It was about reclaiming control, about realizing he still had the power to shape his future, one quiet choice at a time. And as the weeks went on, Eliasray would discover that this single change was just the beginning of a journey that would touch every part of his life, his meals, his energy, even the way he thought about aging itself. The next month, Eliasray and Anna went out to dinner with their oldest friends. It was a small celebration, 35 years since they'd all first met at church. The restaurant was cozy, with low lights and soft music, and the menu boasted of fresh catch of the day. Eliasray smiled, pleased to have an evening where he didn't have to cook, but when his eyes landed on the description of grilled white fish with lemon butter, his chest tightened. White fish, it sounded harmless, even elegant. But the doctor's warning returned to him. Some of the most dangerous fish hide behind vague names. He set the menu down and glanced at Anna. She had already noticed his hesitation. "What is it?" she whispered. Eliasray leaned closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. "What if this is tilefish? He said some places don't tell you the name." Anna looked at him thoughtfully, then nodded. "Then ask," she said simply. But the thought of questioning the waiter embarrassed him. For a man who had spent a lifetime providing, deciding, leading, the idea of admitting he didn't know what was on his plate felt strangely vulnerable. The waiter appeared with a polite smile, ready to take their orders. Eliasray hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "Could you tell me exactly what kind of fish this is?" The waiter blinked, surprised, then quickly answered, "Tilefish, sir, fresh from the Gulf." That one word struck Eliasray like a bell ringing too close to his ear. Tilefish, the very name his doctor had placed at the top of the never-eat list. He felt both relief and unease. Relief that he had asked, unease that if he hadn't, he might have eaten it without ever knowing. He changed his order to cod, a safer choice the doctor had mentioned, and Anna followed suit. When the plates arrived, his friends teased him gently about being picky, but Eliasray only smiled. He cut into the tender cod, thinking not about the taste, but about the quiet power of that single question. What kind of fish is this? It felt small, almost silly, but in that moment he realized it was more than just a question. It was a shield, a way of protecting himself in a world where not every plate was as safe as it seemed. After dinner, as they walked back to the car under the glow of streetlights, Anna slipped her arm through his. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. He looked at her, puzzled. "For what?" she smiled. "For asking, for not pretending you knew. That's not easy for you." He laughed, shaking his head, but inside he felt her words settle deep. She was right. For years, pride had kept him from admitting when he didn't understand, when he needed clarity. But at 71, pride wasn't worth his health. That evening changed the way Eliasray thought about food outside his home. He realized the danger wasn't always obvious, and safety sometimes depended on the courage to speak up. The next time he ate out, he didn't hesitate. He asked again, calmly, confidently. Each time he did, the embarrassment shrank and the sense of control grew. He began to see that health wasn't only about what he chose at the market, but also about the conversations he allowed himself to have. In the weeks that followed, Eliasray noticed another shift. His memory lapses didn't seem as sharp, his energy in the morning steadied, and Anna remarked that he seemed more himself again. Was it just the change in fish? Maybe not entirely, but Eliasray believed it was part of it. More importantly, it was the mindset, the willingness to pause, question, and choose differently that made him feel younger than he had in years. That restaurant dinner could have been just another evening out, another plate of food quickly eaten and forgotten. Instead, it became a marker in his story, a moment where he learned that protecting his health didn't mean giving up joy. It meant stepping forward with curiosity, with courage, and with the quiet humility to ask, "What's really on my plate?" It was Anna's birthday, and the family insisted on taking her somewhere memorable. They chose a fine restaurant, one of those places with crisp white tablecloths and a menu filled with words that seemed too fancy for everyday life. Eliasray wore his best jacket, proud to see Anna smiling, her eyes glowing under the warm light of the candles. But when the waiter came to describe the specials, Eliasray's heart sank just a little. Among the options was swordfish, seared and served with a rich sauce. For most of his life, Eliasray would have thought nothing of it. Swordfish had always carried a certain charm, a treat-yourself aura that made it feel like a luxury. He'd had it only a handful of times in his life, but each time it felt like a celebration, a reward for years of work and effort. Tonight, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, it would have been easy to order it again, to indulge for the sake of tradition. But he remembered the doctor's warning about long-living fish, how they soaked up mercury for years until their flesh carried it like an invisible burden. Still, he hesitated. He thought, it's just one night, just one piece of fish. What harm could it really do? That little voice was tempting, whispering that he deserved this, that at 71 he shouldn't have to second-guess a simple plate of food. But then he looked across the table at Anna. She was laughing with their granddaughter, her face bright with joy. He realized the gift she wanted most wasn't a swordfish dinner or a fleeting indulgence. It was years, more years of walking together, of celebrating birthdays, of seeing their grandchildren grow. So when the waiter turned to him, Eliasray surprised himself. "I'll have the trout," he said calmly. The words felt heavier than they should, like they carried more than just a choice of fish. His son raised an eyebrow. "No swordfish this time, Dad?" Eliasray shook his head and smiled. "Not tonight. I've learned better." He didn't explain further, didn't launch into details about mercury or the dangers of long-living predators. He just let it rest, because sometimes wisdom doesn't need to be defended, it simply needs to be lived. When the plates arrived, Eliasray tasted the trout and found it lighter than he expected, tender and full of flavor. And though the swordfish across the table looked rich and tempting, he didn't feel envy, he felt something stronger. Peace in knowing he had chosen not just for tonight, but for tomorrow. After dinner, while Anna blew out the candles on her cake, Eliasray silently made a wish of his own, that he could keep making choices like this, small but steady, choices that added up to more moments just like this one. On the way home, Anna leaned against him in the car. "You were quiet tonight," she said softly. He smiled. "Just thinking." She glanced at him knowingly. "About the swordfish?" He chuckled. "You know me too well." She squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you didn't. That's a better gift than anything else." That night, lying in bed, Eliasray understood something he hadn't before. Health wasn't about saying no to joy. It wasn't about restriction or fear. It was about choosing differently, reshaping what joy looked like. The taste of swordfish would fade in a few hours, but the strength to walk beside Anna tomorrow, to carry his grandson on his shoulders next weekend, that would linger. He realized indulgence didn't have to be about food. It could be about time, about presence, about the quiet satisfaction of knowing he was doing everything he could to stay. And in that realization, the swordfish lost its power over him. It wasn't a prize anymore. It was just a plate of meat, one he no longer needed. What he craved now was something no menu could offer: more time, more memories, more life. It was his grandson Leo who first suggested it. "Grandpa, you've got to try sushi night with us. It's fun, it's fresh, and you'll love it." Eliasray smiled at the thought. He'd always admired how his grandchildren lived in a different world, full of new foods, new traditions. So one Friday evening, he found himself at a long table in a bustling sushi restaurant, surrounded by bright plates and cheerful chatter. The dishes were colorful, neatly arranged, and Leo grinned as he pointed out a slice of deep red tuna. "This one's the best, Grandpa. Big eye tuna. Try it." The piece gleamed under the light, elegant and rich. Eliasray lifted it with his chopsticks, but something in him hesitated. He remembered the doctor's words about tuna, especially the kind served raw. Big eye and albacore are heavy with mercury, and when eaten raw, they carry risks your immune system can't always fight. He thought of how his body no longer bounced back from small infections like it once did, how even a common cold seemed to linger for weeks now. And suddenly, that single slice of tuna didn't look like an invitation. It looked like a gamble. He set the chopsticks down gently, his hand trembling not from age, but from decision. "I think I'll try this one instead," he said, pointing to a plate of cooked salmon rolls. Leo looked surprised, almost disappointed, but Eliasray smiled warmly. "When you're my age, you learn some foods are safer than others. Doesn't mean I can't enjoy this night, I just enjoy it differently." The boy nodded, curious, and Eliasray could see in his eyes that he was listening more than he let on. As the evening went on, Eliasray laughed with his family, tasted new flavors, and marveled at the lively energy of the place. Yet inside, he felt a quiet pride. He had chosen caution without sacrificing joy. He had said no to the big eye tuna, not because he wanted to miss out, but because he wanted to keep showing up, to keep having nights like this. The truth was, food didn't just fill the stomach, it shaped the future, and at 71, the future felt more precious than ever. Later that night, back home, he stood by the mirror brushing his teeth. His reflection looked older, yes, but steadier too. He thought about the bacteria his body might not fight so easily anymore, the toxins that could settle quietly in his blood. For younger people, sushi was a harmless adventure, but for him, each choice was a step toward either more laughter-filled evenings or more days spent in a hospital bed. He rinsed his mouth, set the toothbrush down, and whispered to himself, "Better safe than sorry." The next morning, Anna found him at the breakfast table with a notebook open. He had written down a simple rule for himself. "If I can cook it, I will. If I can swap it for something safer, I should." She smiled, kissed his forehead, and poured his coffee. "That's wisdom," she said. And Eliasray realized she was right. Wisdom wasn't about knowing everything, it was about having the courage to act differently, even when others didn't. That sushi night became more than a memory of good food. It was a lesson Eliasray carried with him, a reminder that fresh didn't always mean safe, and that joy could still be found in choosing wisely. And in that choice, he discovered something even better than the taste of tuna, the sweet reassurance of knowing he was protecting himself for all the nights still to come. One Saturday morning, Eliasray and Anna wandered through the aisles of their local market. The seafood counter gleamed with rows of neatly wrapped fillets, and his eyes immediately landed on salmon. Its pink flesh looked clean, vibrant, almost glowing under the cold light. For years, he had heard people call salmon a superfood, a protector of the heart, a brain-boosting choice. He picked up a package, proud of himself for moving away from mackerel and swordfish. But as he turned the label over, his brow furrowed. It read, "Farmed salmon, product of Chile." He remembered the doctor's caution. Not all salmon is created equal. Farmed salmon carries hidden risks, antibiotics, colorants, even toxins from the feed. Eliasray felt a pang of doubt. To his eyes, it looked perfect, better even than the wild fish he'd bought weeks before. But he had learned by now that appearances could deceive, and this salmon, beautiful as it was, might not be the friend he thought. At home, he mentioned it to Anna as she rinsed vegetables at the sink. "I'm not sure about this one," he admitted, holding up the package. She turned, studied it, and then said softly, "Sometimes things that shine brightest aren't the safest. Didn't the doctor tell you to look for wild caught?" Eliasray sighed, feeling almost foolish. He wanted to do better, but the choices weren't always simple. The safer option cost more, wasn't always available, and looked less perfect to the untrained eye. That evening, as he set the salmon on the cutting board, the doubt grew heavier. He thought about the crowded fish pens, the antibiotics hidden in their feed, the chemicals used to paint their flesh a convincing pink. He pictured those toxins settling quietly into his body, stirring inflammation, straining his heart, clouding his joints. For a moment, the knife hovered above the fillet, and he couldn't bring himself to cut. He wrapped it back up and set it aside, then reached into the freezer where 2 portions of wild-caught Alaskan salmon waited, the ones he had bought weeks ago at a higher price. Anna noticed the switch. "Why not the fresh one?" she asked. Eliasray shrugged, but his voice was steady. Because fresh doesn't always mean safe. I'd rather pay a little more for fewer regrets. They grilled the wild salmon that night, and though the flavor was milder, Eliasray ate with peace in his heart. The next morning, he felt light, steady, free from the heaviness that sometimes followed a meal. It was a small reassurance, but enough to remind him why the choice mattered. Days later, his daughter called and asked if he could help move a few boxes in her garage. Eliasray almost said no, expecting the usual stiffness in his joints, but to his surprise, he felt strong enough to help. As he lifted the boxes, his daughter remarked, "You seem more energetic lately, Dad." He smiled but didn't explain. How could he describe that it wasn't just about fish, it was about knowing he was no longer feeding his body with hidden poisons, no longer surrendering to the quiet dangers wrapped in plastic and presented as health. That night, Eliasray sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, writing down another rule in his notebook. Choose wild over farmed, always. It was simple, almost childlike in its clarity, but it carried the weight of wisdom earned. He knew he wouldn't always get it right. He knew there would be days of temptation, of shortcuts, of convenience. But as long as he remembered this truth, he could steer himself back toward safety. For Eliasray, the shift wasn't just about salmon, it was about learning that not everything labeled healthy was truly healing. It was about peering past the surface, past the shine, to see what lay beneath. And as he closed the notebook, he felt a quiet strength rise within him. He had begun to see the world of food differently, no longer as a passive consumer, but as a protector of his own years, his own future. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when the craving hit him, the kind of rain that drummed on the roof and carried the smell of wet earth through the windows. Eliasray sat in his armchair, a book open on his lap, when the thought rose unbidden. Fried catfish, it was the food of his childhood, a dish that carried the voices of his parents, the warmth of family kitchens, the laughter of cousins gathered around a crowded table. For a moment, the memory was so vivid he could almost taste it, the golden crust, the tender flesh, the comfort it always brought. He mentioned it to Anna, half hoping she'd dismiss it, but she only smiled knowingly. "You always loved catfish," she said. "Shall I buy some tomorrow?" The words tugged at his heart. He did love catfish, but he also remembered the doctor's warning about imported varieties, the way they were raised in murky waters, pumped with antibiotics that left invisible marks. The thought of those hidden chemicals dampened his nostalgia. Comfort food, yes, but was it still comfort if it carried danger? The next day, at the market, he stood at the seafood counter, staring at the labels. Catfish from Vietnam, catfish from Thailand, neatly packaged, priced lower than everything else. And then, tucked to the side, a smaller label, U.S. farm-raised catfish. It cost more, looked plainer, but something in him softened. He picked it up almost reverently, as though honoring both the boy he once was and the man he had become. At home, Anna dredged the fillets in cornmeal just the way his mother used to. The smell filled the kitchen, pulling memories from the corners of his heart. As he sat at the table, Eliasray felt a strange mix of past and present colliding, the comfort of childhood and the wisdom of age. He took his first bite, closed his eyes, and let the flavor settle. It was familiar, yes, but lighter somehow, carrying not just the taste of yesterday, but the reassurance of today's safer choice. After dinner, he leaned back in his chair, watching Anna clear the plates. "It's funny," he said softly, "how food can hold memory, but maybe the best way to honor those memories is to make them safe for today." She smiled, wiping her hands on a towel, and kissed the top of his head. "That's why we're still here, love, learning, choosing, protecting." That night, Eliasray opened his notebook one last time and wrote, "Comfort food should bring comfort, not harm." He underlined it twice. It wasn't about giving up the past. It was about carrying it forward, reshaped, refined, safer for the years still waiting ahead. The catfish hadn't betrayed him after all, not when chosen carefully, not when cooked with love. Instead, it had become a bridge between who he was and who he still hoped to be. As the rain eased outside and the house grew quiet, Eliasray sat with a full heart. His journey over these months hadn't been about fish alone. It had been about awareness, about courage, about small decisions that added up to something far greater. He realized health was not in one dramatic gesture, but in the quiet discipline of choosing again and again, choosing safety over risk, clarity over pride, presence over fleeting indulgence. And as he drifted to sleep beside Anna, Eliasray felt lighter, stronger, and deeply grateful for knowledge, for the chance to act on it, and for the gift of more tomorrows still waiting to be lived. Weeks passed, and Eliasray's small notebook began to fill with lines of wisdom, phrases scribbled in neat handwriting, each one a reflection of a lesson learned at the table. Choose wild over farmed. Ask what's on the plate. Cook it if you can. Comfort food should bring comfort, not harm. These weren't just rules about fish anymore. They had become guideposts, a compass pointing him toward a safer, steadier life. One afternoon, his daughter stopped by with groceries. She spotted the notebook on the counter, open to the latest entry. "Dad, what's this?" she asked with a playful smile. Eliasray hesitated, then handed it to her. As she read, her expression softened. "You've been keeping track," she whispered, "not just of food, of choices." She looked at him with new eyes, and he realized that in her heart she wasn't just seeing her father anymore. She was seeing a teacher. That evening, the family gathered again for dinner, and for the first time, Eliasray shared some of his notes out loud. He didn't preach, didn't lecture, just told them the stories: the Sunday grill, the restaurant dinner, the sushi night, the salmon he put back, the catfish that carried memory without danger. The room grew quiet as they listened, not out of politeness but out of recognition. They saw themselves in his story, the foods they trusted without thinking, the small lapses they excused as just getting older. Anna reached for his hand under the table, her eyes shining. "You're not just changing what you eat," she said softly. "You're changing how we see food, too." Eliasray felt a warmth spread through him, deeper than any meal could bring. It was the realization that his journey wasn't just his, it was theirs. By making wiser choices, he was quietly protecting everyone he loved, teaching them to look closer, to ask questions, to honor their health as fiercely as their memories. Later that night, as he sat alone with his notebook, Eliasray wrote one more line. "This is not about giving up. It's about holding on to life, to clarity, to the people I love." He closed the book and placed it on the nightstand, not as a set of rules, but as a story still being written. And for the first time in years, he felt not just older, but wiser, like a man who had finally learned that age does not take power away. It simply asks you to use it differently. It was a Wednesday evening when the phone rang. Old friends from church had invited Eliasray and Anna over for supper. Nothing fancy, they promised, just good company and a warm meal. Eliasray accepted gladly. He always cherished these gatherings, the laughter and the easy conversations that seemed to erase the weight of age. When they arrived, the table was already set, and the smell of frying fish filled the kitchen. Their hosts beamed with pride, carrying out a platter of golden fillies. "Catfish," they said cheerfully, "just the way we've always made it." Eliasray's heart sank for a moment. He thought of the market labels, the warnings about imported varieties, the quiet dangers hidden behind familiar comfort. The fish looked delicious, and his friends had cooked with love, but his mind whispered caution. Anna glanced at him, reading his silence. He smiled faintly, not wanting to offend. The plate was passed, and he took a piece, small and polite. As the meal went on, he ate slowly, carefully, savoring the laughter more than the food. His friends talked about their grandchildren, their aches and joys, their memories of better days. Eliasray listened, nodding, but inside he felt a pull, an awareness that even here, surrounded by love, he had to make choices that protected him. On the way home, Anna asked softly, "Did it bother you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Not the company," he said, "but the fish. I couldn't stop wondering where it came from, what it carried." She touched his arm gently. "You handled it well. Sometimes it's not about saying no, it's about how you say yes." That night, lying awake, Eliasray realized something important. He couldn't control every meal offered to him, every plate set down in front of him, but he could control his response. He could choose moderation, gratitude, and caution all at once. Food wasn't just about health, it was also about connection. And sometimes the wiser path was not to reject a gesture of love, but to meet it halfway, with smaller bites, with balance, with awareness that one meal does not undo a journey. The next morning, he wrote another line in his notebook. "It's not only what we eat, but how we eat it, with wisdom, with gratitude, with care." He underlined it once, then closed the book with a soft smile. For Eliasray, the shift was clear now. Health wasn't about fear, and it wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing wisely, even when the choice was hidden in the simplest of moments. A friend's dinner table, a platter of fried fish, a memory carried in every bite. And as the sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, Eliasray felt lighter again. He was learning not just how to avoid danger, but how to live fully, even in its presence. It was a Sunday afternoon when the grandchildren came tumbling into the house, their voices filling every corner like music. Eliasray loved these visits, the way the children brought light into the rooms, the way their energy seemed endless. That day, Anna had prepared a simple lunch, baked salmon with vegetables. As the children gathered around the table, one of them wrinkled his nose. "Why don't we ever have Grandpa's grilled fish anymore, the one from the big BBQs?" The question hung in the air, innocent but sharp. Eliasray smiled gently, carving a piece of salmon onto the boy's plate. "Because, my dear, not all fish are the same. Some are better for keeping me strong, so I can keep up with all of you." The children's eyes widened, curious. They wanted to understand, and in their eagerness, Eliasray saw a chance, not to lecture, but to share. He told them about the Sunday grill, about the way he used to love mackerel, and how he learned that certain fish carry things the body can't handle so well as you get older. He didn't speak of toxins or mercury in a heavy way. Instead, he framed it like a story. Imagine your backpack is heavy with stones. When you're young, you can carry more without noticing. But when you're older, even one stone can slow you down. Some fish put too many stones in my backpack, so now I choose the ones that don't weigh me down. The room grew quiet as the children listened. Even little Leo, who usually wiggled in his chair, sat still. Finally, his granddaughter piped up. "So the salmon is the light fish?" Eliasray laughed softly. "Exactly. It keeps me moving. It lets me play tag in the yard with you instead of sitting on the porch, watching." Their faces lit up at that, and suddenly the salmon didn't seem so boring. They took bites, chewing thoughtfully, as if the food itself now carried part of his story. Later, after the dishes were cleared, Leo tugged at his sleeve. "Grandpa, when I get older, I'll eat the light fish too, so my backpack doesn't get heavy." Eliasray's eyes stung with quiet tears, and he hugged the boy close. "That's the idea, son. You're already wiser than I was." That night, as the house settled back into stillness, Eliasray opened his notebook and wrote, "Teaching is not in the words, but in the living." He realized his journey had become more than self-preservation. It was a legacy. By changing his plate, he was changing theirs too, passing down not just recipes, but a way of seeing food as something more than taste. It was memory, health, and love, all bound together. Anna, reading over his shoulder, kissed the top of his head. "You've turned your health into a story," she whispered. Eliasray smiled, closing the notebook. "No," he said softly, "into a gift." The fellowship hall buzzed with chatter, the long tables lined with casseroles, pies, and steaming trays. Eliasray had always loved these church potlucks, the laughter, the music drifting from the piano, the way food seemed to draw everyone closer. This time, he carried his own dish, a simple salad with roasted vegetables, though he knew it would sit quietly beside the crowd pleasers. As he moved down the line, his plate in hand, his eyes fell on a tray of fried fish fillets, golden and crisp. "Best catfish in town," one of the deacons boasted proudly. People were already piling it onto their plates, the smell filling the room. Eliasray felt the old tug, the memory of flavor and tradition. He hesitated, the serving spoon hovering just inches from his plate. Anna nudged him gently. "Remember your rule," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. He nodded, stepping past the tray, but a few friends noticed. "No catfish for you, Elias?" one asked, half teasing. He smiled politely. "Not tonight. I've learned my body needs something different these days." The words came easier than he expected, without shame or defensiveness. Still, a few raised eyebrows reminded him that change often drew questions. He filled his plate with roasted chicken, vegetables, and a spoonful of rice. At the table, surrounded by laughter and conversation, he didn't feel deprived. He felt present. As others went back for seconds of catfish, Eliasray savored his food slowly, grateful for what it gave rather than what it lacked. The truth was, his journey had made him more mindful, more aware that health wasn't about fitting in, but about staying strong enough to keep showing up, for church, for family, for life itself. Later that evening, as chairs were folded and leftovers packed away, a woman from the congregation approached him. She was in her 60s, her hands stiff from arthritis. "I noticed you skipped the fish," she said quietly. "Is there something I should know?" Eliasray hesitated, then shared gently what he had learned, that not all fish were the same, that some carried hidden burdens, and that age made those burdens harder to bear. Her eyes widened and she nodded slowly. "Maybe that explains why I always feel worse after these meals," she murmured. Driving home, Anna glanced at him. "You may have helped her tonight," she said. Eliasray thought about it, the way one small choice could ripple outward, touching lives beyond his own. He realized then that his decisions weren't only protecting himself. They were planting seeds, seeds of awareness, of wisdom, of care, that others could choose to water in their own time. At home, he opened his notebook once more and wrote, "Courage at the table can inspire courage in others." He closed it with a sense of quiet pride. For Eliasray, the potluck hadn't been about resisting temptation. It had been about living his truth gently, without judgment, showing that it was possible to honor both tradition and health in the same breath. And as the night deepened, Eliasray felt the gift of his choices more than ever. They were no longer just protecting his tomorrows, they were shaping the tomorrows of those around him too. When I look back on Eliasray's story, I see not just a man who changed what he put on his plate, but a man who learned how small choices could reshape his entire future. He began with trembling hands at a Sunday grill, unaware that the very fish he thought was keeping him strong was slowly wearing him down. And step by step, through market aisles, restaurant dinners, family gatherings, and even church potlucks, he chose differently. He traded silence for questions, temptation for wisdom, and habit for intentional care. What stands out most is not the fish he gave up, but the life he gained. He discovered that health is not about fear or restriction, it's about protection. It's about staying steady enough to lift boxes for his daughter, clear-headed enough to share stories with his grandchildren, strong enough to laugh around a table without wondering what's weighing on his body in secret. Eliasray's transformation reminds us that change doesn't happen in one dramatic leap. It happens in quiet decisions made over and over, in the courage to ask, "What's on my plate?" and in the love that compels us to protect our days with those who matter most. So, as you reflect on his journey, let it be more than a story. Let it be a gentle nudge toward your own choices. Look closely at what you bring into your home, what you share at your table, and remember, you have more power than you think, because in the end, health is not just about years added to life. It's about life added to years. And with each mindful choice, you too can find the strength to stay present, to stay joyful, and to stay here for all the moments still waiting.